if I only think about people who have the same problems that I have, then I am missing out on potentially a bunch of really fantastic solutions that I wouldn't ever have to come up with unless I look through somebody else's lens, you know?
Hey everybody, I'm Jonathan, maker, designer, inventor, and Autodesker. Welcome to Shop Talk, the podcast series where we talk with makers, engineers, and designers from shop to shop. Today, we're talking with Bob Clagett. If you don't know Bob, you're missing out. He's a legendary maker. Bob's projects span from pop culture, television, and film projects to practical projects like kitchen cabinetry. His work is fun and inspiring, and he also always brings in a practical element, an instructional element, and helps you be successful making your own stuff. I'm really excited about this one, so let's jump in. Yeah, so Bob, thanks for coming, man. I'm a big fan, have been for a long time. I think I first came across your work really when I started getting into making myself. When I started realizing there was a whole world on YouTube of other makers and that there was like this community was starting to build around, I don't know, 2014, somewhere around there. Yeah, I'm stoked to have this conversation with you. I think it's going to be super interesting to our audience. And if you wouldn't mind, just give us a quick intro. Tell us who you are and
Yeah, sure.
what you do.
Sure. I'm Bob Clagett. I run a channel called I Like to Make Stuff. It was a domain I picked up way before I needed it. I just happened to have it around, which was really cool. But for, I don't know, 10 years or so, I've just been making stuff on the internet, woodworking and metalworking and robotics and props and kind of whatever is interesting to me at the time, week to week, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool to have the opportunity to just make whatever I want, but that's what I do.
Do you make stuff that's interesting to you specifically? Is that kind of your starting point for everything? Or do you kind of quietly crowdsource and try to figure out what's going to move the needle and what people want to see?
It's absolutely me. Yeah, I wish I could say that I was that calculated to like watch trends and, think about what movies are coming up and stuff like that, but I don't. I'm just and actually I was telling somebody last night that the interesting thing about that making stuff, well, a lot of what I make is for my family. I've renovated our house, and so a lot of it is very practical. We want this. But a lot of the other stuff, like Optimus Prime head and Star Wars costumes, those are me. Those are child of the 80s. This is what I love. But I am absolutely aging out of this stuff being relevant to the people that are watching. And I'm fully aware of that. So I'm not sure how much longer this type of stuff's going to be able to carry interesting videos. But
I bet, do you find yourself showing your kids like I'm not going to show you the new Transformers movie. Let's watch the one from the 80s with
oh
like
yeah,
who did the soundtrack for that? It was like some really big metal band.
there's a bunch of bands on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's got like a
there were quite a few.
solid hair metal soundtrack and
Yeah, yeah.
you know.
Yeah, we've watched that one way more than we've watched any of the modern. Yeah. And we go back. It's funny, the Saturday morning cartoons is a thing of the past, but
Yeah.
we occasionally still do that in my house. My kids are all teenagers now, but
Yeah.
we will sit down with some 80s Transformers and He-Man and Thundercats, and I'm
Yes.
like, it's good stuff. Like whether you think it's good or not, we're still gonna watch it. And they love it. It's fun.
I wonder if there's a connection between I grew up the same way as you. We're about the same age, Saturday morning cartoons. I loved Transformers and all that stuff and Star Wars and everything else. Um, is there something about those shows, those what do you call them? Universes or whatever that inspired you to make stuff?
Oh yeah. Big time.
Yeah.
Um, so I think one of the big things was the toy side of it, right? Like all of those properties, they had these great shows and books and all games and stuff, but they were all there because they were trying to sell toys.
Yeah.
And it totally worked on me. I was actually looking, if you look right behind me, this box right here,
Oh
before we
yeah.
recorded today, I was looking at that box and I picked it up and I thought out loud by myself, man, I love this thing because it's just, I don't know, there's something really simple about these big plastic 80s toys that were accessible and easy to make and like I just you see those pictures of these toys just stacked in Toys R Us, and there were so many of them. And now the toy industry and the collector side of the toy thing is totally different than it was. But for me, I think having these things and not having these things was what drove me to try to make a lot of stuff. So I would take Lego and I would build a thing onto that Star Wars ship to make the
Yeah.
transform that I wanted or whatever. And so I was constantly trying to figure out how to use the stuff that I had, the toys that I had that were building toys or maybe not, and fill in the gaps in my toy collection. And as you can see with like the cabinet and stuff, like I've been a toy collector for most of my life. Um, but so I definitely made stuff to fill in the gaps around all these things that I loved. And I wanted to, play with and think about and experiment with and like have this imagination around these things. And if I didn't have the thing to play with, I'd just replace it with something else.
Have you seen the meme? It's every Christmas it comes out and it's like this is the 30th anniversary of me not getting the GI Joe aircraft
Yeah.
carrier.
Oh yeah.
It was like this giant toy. It was, I don't know, like 5 feet long or something. And
Yeah.
it costs like a ridiculous amount of money. And I didn't know anybody who had one, but yeah, same here. I made one out of cardboard. It's like, this is,
Yeah.
and figured out how to paint stuff. And yeah. And also like I'm sure you were into the behind the scenes stuff on your favorite movies and you'd get like glimpses of how they made certain things or like made props or, just how matte painting works, that kind of stuff. Um, yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I never really thought of it that way, but I think I had a similar trajectory when it came to making stuff.
Yeah, and there were a lot of things in that time period that a lot of movies and media that didn't get the toy treatment as well at
Yeah,
the time. It did eventually, but like Tron. Tron was a
yeah,
huge one for me.
yeah.
And there were toys, but they weren't available when I was into Tron. Either I missed it or whatever. And so that was one of those things that like visually, what is this?
Oh
This
yeah,
is so new. This is so different for me. And it captured my imagination and I had nothing to play with. And so then it was like, yeah, well, I mean, how do I make a light cycle out of cardboard or a G.I. Joe motorcycle? How do I make that look like a light cycle? And it was a lot of that type of stuff.
yeah. So you grew up making stuff, right? And then high school's over, college comes along. What's your what did you go for?
I actually ended up going to an art school in Savannah, the Savannah College of Art and Design, and I went for graphic design, thinking that that was I don't know why I did that. It was the wrong move, but
You'd heard of it.
I'd heard of it exactly. Yeah. I liked computers. It seemed like it was going to be happening on computers in a couple of years mostly, and so I think that was part of it. I loved the school. I loved the experience of art school, but graphic design, I very quickly learned was not my thing.
Yeah.
But like I made a lot of stuff as a kid, and then high school was music. Was like I'm now in a rock band, and I'm doing this stuff, and I'm like a skater guy and whatever. And I was not really making things. College was getting all this exposure to um, composition and all these fundamental things about like color theory and all of this stuff that at the time seemed really like I don't know why color theory matters to me, and it's been one of the skills that I have used more than anything else the rest of my life. So college was a lot of that, and then I got out of college and started needing furniture for my apartment, and that's when all of those things started to accumulate. And I'm like, oh, I can build a really terrible bed, but it's a bed. Cool. I can build a terrible desk, but it's a desk. Cool. And so right after college is when all that stuff started kind of connecting, for me.
All right, Bob. So this is shop talk, and we need to talk about your shop. So the room you're in clearly isn't the shop where you have all your tools and so on. So let's just start there.
Okay. So this is my office, which originally was a storage room that I converted into my office. And it has become this, right now it's a huge mess, but it feels like that. You ever see that picture of George Lucas standing in the archives where there's like everything from every movie?
Yeah.
It feels like that.
Okay.
Except, it's my excuse for it being messy. But yeah, basically all the stuff that I really love, I keep in this room because it's like my little inspiration cave. So I've got a bunch of music stuff back here. I've got a bunch of things that I've made, a bunch of toys from my childhood, and then electronics setup and everything back there. But it needs work.
Yeah.
But I do kind of love all the stuff that's in this space.
And your electronic setup is in there because sawdust?
Yes, pretty
Got it.
much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then could you just describe your shop?
So the shop is golly, it's like 1,700 square feet. It's a
Wow.
really big area. Yeah. I went from a one-car garage in the previous house
Yeah.
to this shop. And so I've got it kind of broken into, pretty big woodworking area with all the typical woodworking stuff and maybe some atypical tools in there, but it's basically just a wood shop. And then on the other side, I've got a plasma table and some metalworking tools that eventually, and I've got like a Bridgeport and an old South Bend lathe, stuff that I barely know how to use, but I
Yeah.
really would love to eventually use. So that whole side over there is very secondary because I don't do as much wood metal work as I do everything else. But I've got a bunch of automotive projects that I'm kind of slowly working on, and so I think it's going to become a lot more important over the next couple of years for me over there. But
You kind of already told us this, but you started making stuff by hand before you got into CAD. What was kind of the turning point where you realized like this is, that computer aided design is something that's accessible and that like you want to get into?
well, I mean, from the CAD perspective, it happened later on, but the computer thing happened really early. Like I said, I was started in graphic design, and I went into this graphic design 101 class. And I remember the first day, this guy named Mark was the professor, and he said, I want everybody to know we're not using computers in this class. And I'm like, I'm out. Just, nope, that's not what I wanted because my brain was already headed toward, I can't do this well by hand. I know I can't.
Mhm.
And that's not me being hard on myself. It's just, I know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And I want the computer to help me do this design better. And I totally understand why he didn't want us to use computers, but at the time I was like, that's just not where I want to go. I want this thing to enhance what I can do rather than like. And so I switched majors to computer art right away so that I could take advantage of the computers to do, I did 3D modeling. We had to learn 2D animation, 3D modeling, graphic design, print layout. We did sound design, we did film, we did all these things that were really computer centric. And through those years in school, I just realized how much those tools could enhance what I was capable of with a camera or with, paper and pencil. And so then when it came time to start actually building, um, to start building furniture in my apartment, the only thing I knew was Softimage, which is like what
Yeah.
people used to use to make movies and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Characters.
I guess I can design a 2x4 table in Softimage. And so that's kind of where I started doing that type of stuff, which is the wrong tool for the job,
Yeah.
but it was like what
I
I had.
started in Maya doing the same thing, which
Yep.
again is just like ridiculous. Why on earth would anybody use that tool for a table or a chair?
Yeah. I'm going to use this Lamborghini to drive my trash down to the end
Yeah,
of the driveway. It's like one of those.
exactly.
Yeah. So it started there. And then, as I went on and started doing this more regularly, I started in SketchUp. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about other brands and other softwares and
No, it's
stuff,
fine.
but
Yeah.
I started in SketchUp and I was thinking about this morning that the first thing I really designed was the first arcade cabinet that I built. And
Uh-huh.
I built this whole like the most complex thing I'd ever modeled in SketchUp. And I got to the end of it. It has storage on the inside of it. It's like there's a bunch of pieces. Got to the end of it and I was like, this thing's gonna weigh like a ton at least. I should make this whole thing out of half-inch MDF instead of three-quarter-inch MDF. And then I looked at the model and I was like,
Oh no.
I can't do that. Like
Yeah. I would have to start over.
what do I do? Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, well, I'm weighing the weight and the price of three-quarter-inch or the time of starting over. And I'm like, I guess I'm just gonna pay more and it's gonna be heavy.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And I remember that very specifically because that was the time where I thought this tool is not gonna help me anymore.
Yep.
Like there's a point where it didn't help me past, you know. And then jumping forward to a few years later, a guy named Taylor, I think, was working on the Fusion team, and he cornered me at a Maker Faire one time, and he was like, "You don't know
Taylor
me?
Stein.
Yeah, yeah." And he was like, "You don't know me, but you should use Fusion, and I will walk you through it on a video call." And I'm like, Sure, it's another thing to learn. Okay, whatever." So we get on this video call, and he starts showing me the parametric stuff, and I'm like, ah, this is it. I got
Yep.
it. Okay, I get so excited. And that was like the moment when this tool is going to work for me. And I
Yeah.
know we're not trying to do like a Fusion commercial or anything, but like that was a breakthrough. That was one of those, kind of paper and pencil to computer type.
Yep.
Wow, this is big for me. And so that really changed kind of how I used modeling, CAD stuff in general going forward.
Yeah.
I had more faith in it, I guess.
Well, no, I mean, 10 years ago, nobody really knew about parametrics in the maker world for the most part.
Yeah.
If you were an engineer, you did, right? Because you used some high end product that was made for for the industry. You were working on HVAC systems or, automotive or something like that. But most of us that were just interested in making stuff were using whatever software we could get our hands on, like you said, that did not have parametrics in it, and not really understanding what difference it makes. And now it's like, I mean, you go look at any kind of maker account, you look at any like open source project or whatever it is, it's like everybody gets it now, because you might not get that same batch of plywood. It might be off by a 16th of an inch. And depending on what your tolerances are, like you need to be able to go back there and tweak that little parameter and, you know,
Yeah.
pray to the gods of CAD to make sure you did everything right and it doesn't explode when you do that. But,
Right.
you know, we've all had that problem.
Yeah.
Um, so how did you go from this being a hobby to like making a full brand out of I like to make stuff? What was tell us about that journey.
Well, so I was doing software development at the time. I did that for about 15 years, and I was working remotely at home. I was working for Dell actually, and spending a lot of time at the desk, just heads down. I had young kids, and I really started. I felt like I need to start making stuff again with my hands, just as a kind of to get my brain right in between those two worlds. The like hyper focus of development to attending to other people and all that stuff. And so I started building just some simple stuff around the house and for some friends. And then I felt really guilty about that, about like not getting paid for it at the job and not being useful at home. It was this in between. It was valuable, but I still kind of felt guilty about it. So I was like, oh, I'll start making a blog about this stuff, and I'll just take pictures and describe it so at least somebody else can find it useful, because I had found that stuff useful for other people. Turned out I hated doing that. Turned out taking photos along the way was a huge pain.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, I already have video experience. I had been doing music on YouTube for a few years and stuff, so I already had a lot of experience there. So I just started making videos about it. And I've always told people that that period of my life was like you're walking downhill and then you start to stumble and then you're just going faster and faster downhill and then you're falling downhill and you can't stop yourself. It was that. It was like,
Yeah.
I can do video. Oh, I can do more video. Oh, I can make that. Oh, and it was just one thing after another. And I remember one time my manager at Dell, a great guy, we had like a one-on-one call, and he was like, I'm not firing you, but I know that you probably need to go do this other thing at some point. I was like, what thing? What? I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, I've seen your YouTube channel. I know what you're doing, and it's awesome. And whenever you're ready to go do that, you have my support. And it
Wow.
was it was like the coolest thing.
What a
And
guy.
so after that, we started, and it had started growing, but I was still trying to do, it was very, very part-time. And so basically, I got to a point to where my wife and I said, let's try a fixed time period. I picked like 9 months to do two full-time jobs. I'm going to work both of these things as hard as I can. And after 9 months, we'll decide which one of those things was in the way of the other. Because that was
Oh
kind of the
yeah.
way I looked at it. I didn't want to do startup mode forever to where I'm just going to run myself into the ground. I'm going to put a fixed amount of time on it. And I figured I would be able to find one thing that was in the way. And I think it took 3 months, maybe, before I was like, software's got to go. Like it's got to
Yeah.
go. It was going well, and I enjoyed it so much more. And so that was really the kind of shift toward full time. And it didn't happen immediately, but that was the decision point of this is where we need to go. And if that's the case, then I have to plan these things and I have to get all this stuff ready. And so that was in uh 2014,
Hmm.
2015, something like that. I don't remember exactly. And so it's been that long of just trying to figure out how to do it. I mean, honestly, like I don't think anybody that says they understand all of this content creation stuff and like, being online for a living, anybody that says they understand it and they've got a real plan for it is lying.
Yeah.
It's everybody's figuring it out. So I'm constantly still trying to figure it out, but it's been very blessed. It's gone very well.
Yeah. No, it clearly has. And, I remember talking to you. You came on a tour of the San Francisco Tech Center in, what was that, like 2016, 2017, maybe?
Yeah, probably.
Something like that. And I remember talking to you about you were sort of, maybe, I'm sure this is always the case, but this bucket pays this, and I get, yeah, I'm monetized on YouTube and that's this much. And then I have sponsorships, which is like this, there's all these different pieces that bring income and like, keep you afloat. Um, and now you've got, yeah, your YouTube channel and all that, but you've got a bunch of other avenues for your business now. So can you talk about those?
Yeah, I think, over the years, one of the things that has become really the sponsorship stuff has always been great, and it's a really weird economy. Like the money that we get for what we do is really out of balance to the rest of the world, in my opinion, but I'm not complaining about it. So that's been a big thing. But then, I realized later on that the more things I made, people wanted to make them too, or some variation of them or something. So we started doing plans pretty early on. In fact, I think that arcade cabinet was probably the first set of plans we did.
Hmm.
And that's become really big and now is something that I am constantly trying to figure out if I make a little tweak to this project, does that make it more accessible to somebody else? Or should I just go full in on, my weird vision for this desk that fits in this one place or whatever? Um, so the digital plans became really big for us. And then my whole thing the whole time really has been to get rid of the black boxes around making stuff for people,
Mm.
whether that's software, electronics, 3D printing, the hidden knowledge that people don't just randomly get um, when they see the start and finish and that's it. So I started looking for things that had a lot of mystique around them for most people. And modeling is one of those things, coding is one of those things, electronics, anything that's really not tangible in front of you is really hard for somebody to get their brain around unless somebody walks them through it. So we started trying to build more, and I did a bunch of free videos around more in-depth discussion about electronics and how microcontrollers work and all this type of stuff. And then eventually that turned into we started doing online courses. And we did a course to teach Fusion called Fusion 360 for Makers, which I guess we have to change the name now. They're just
Yes, you
Fusion for
do.
Makers. Okay. So we did that course and we did that during COVID because all of a sudden me and the whole team had to stay home. And it was like, well, we've been talking about doing this course for a while. This is kind of the perfect opportunity I can shoot it on my own, pass it to somebody, they edit it, and it just got passed around. So it took us a couple of months to do that. And that has become really successful for us. We've had probably 5,000 students take that course, and it's been in a bunch of schools, a bunch of
Cool.
engineering departments, and high schools are using it and stuff, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So it's doing exactly what we set out to do with that, is just to kind of get rid of the mystique, make it accessible for people. And then this last year took the same plan towards Arduino microcontroller programming
Hmm.
and made another online course about that. And it's about the electronics and about the coding separately, and then how to integrate them together. And that stuff is really natural to me. It's where I've lived most of my professional life. So uh, that was a fun one to put together. And so now we're looking for more things like that that can both give us income, but be really valuable to people that want to be able to make stuff and there's a block in front of them. Like, how can we get them past that block by teaching? So those are big income sources for us. And then really the plans and the courses were the big things. They're also great because they've been things that, we do a lot of work up front to make them and then they just kind of sell. And then versus the YouTube thing where every couple of weeks I got to come up with another idea for a thing to make. And sometimes it's natural, sometimes it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then, I got to hope that there's money around that thing or sponsorship to go with it or whatever. But the stuff that we actually control product wise um, has been really good and it's been digital.
Hmm.
So that, we've tested a few physical products and that's just a much, much harder nut to crack for us.
Hardware's hard.
Yeah, yeah, for real. So I think that's still in the future for us
Hmm.
somewhere. I mean, I still would really like to take the solving a problem for people thing and make it physical. I
Hmm.
just don't know what that is yet. So
Okay. Any
I'm kind of
ideas on what
learning.
that might be? Categories, maybe? Like, are
I
we
have
talking
new,
consumer products or furniture? Or like, scale? I'd imagine small scale is probably
yeah,
what you would want
small
to go
scale.
for if you're going to be shipping stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I think
Yeah.
small scale is it. And I think it's really easy for people in my position who create content as like their main thing to be like, well, yeah, I want to make something for people, so I'm just going to take this thing right here and make it orange, and then I'm going to sell this to them
Yeah.
orange. And I don't want to do that. I don't,
Right.
that's not, if this being orange helped somehow, sure, but it doesn't. Maybe you could find it easier. But so I think I really want to, or want to come up with something that makes somebody's job easier. Well, so here's an example. Back when I was doing software, I went from working in a marketing company to where we were making websites and promotional stuff for people. And I found one day that I was basically trying to convince people to buy stuff they didn't really need.
Mm.
And I really didn't like that feeling. And I kind of didn't realize I was in that position until just one day. And so when I moved to Dell, I went from marketing something that I didn't make to making something for IT professionals to make their jobs easier on a daily basis.
Hmm.
And just that marketing to product shift was it was huge for my motivation in doing work every day. I'm like, I know it's weird that it's exciting that I'm making a piece of software that helps somebody provision a mobile phone at a distance, but it made that guy's job or that girl's job easier. And
Yeah.
like that was really worthwhile. So I want to do that again for some specific group of people. And I don't know if that's just like maker people in general or if it's an industry or I don't think it's, making a better hammer. I don't think it's
Right.
something like that,
You're
but
probably not going to improve on the hammer. No, no offense, Bob.
probably not. Yeah, probably not. Unless it's
Yeah.
orange. Just kidding. Yeah,
I get your
that's fair.
point. It's a good point, though. The other thing is like, I think you're definitely approaching it the right way, which is you need a customer in mind. You need somebody that's specific, that needs something specific, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people, we just had this conversation with Zach Friedman in a previous episode, but he was a consultant for hardware startups for a long time. He said one of the problems they had is that people that are into hardware, that make hardware startups, are just really into hardware. So they're just really excited about making something and putting it out there. And a lot of them didn't start from the point of view of, I need to make something useful for a person that I can like identify, right? So you clearly have that part figured out.
Well,
And
I
that
mean,
that
that I have that constraint,
right.
but yeah, I don't think
Right,
it's figured
exactly.
out because it's actually difficult. That makes it more difficult to find anything because I vet every idea that I've had against a bunch of constraints, which I think is the right way to do it, but it makes it harder
Yeah,
in that 99% of my ideas are not a good idea yet.
sure.
So,
Yeah, well, that checks out, man. I think, and it's also your story is interesting because you're also that guy, right? Like you make stuff that you're interested in, and then you start thinking, okay, well, what else? If I didn't know how to do this, what would I need, right? And then you start getting into the training and stuff like that. Um, yeah, it's on the one hand, you could start from that point of view and say, oh, you're just kind of self-absorbed and you only do the stuff that you care about, but you realize that you're one of a million other people that are have the same interests and like want to do the same kind of stuff. Kind of makes it easy to identify your customer when your customer at the end of the day is basically you, right?
right. Yeah. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I do know that a lot of the things I've made, especially for videos, are with me as the customer in mind. And I've also found that that can be a bad way to look at things. If I only think about people who have the same problems that I have, then I am missing out on potentially a bunch of really fantastic solutions that I wouldn't ever have to come up with unless I look through somebody else's lens, you know. And that's a hard thing to do. I don't know how to make myself feel like somebody else, but it is a goal, especially when it comes to making a useful something for the shop for, and then like, what is the shop? Well, the shop might be a leatherworking shop, or maybe it's a
Mhm.
woodworking shop, or maybe it's a metalworking shop, maybe it's a car place. I don't know how to be those people to see what their needs are. So, um, I'm trying to figure that out too. How do I identify gaps in somebody else's workflow that I don't have? And how do I find places that could be, improved or corrected or whatever in other people's shops? I don't really know how to do that yet.
Can you tell us about a breakthrough project, something you did where all of a sudden you realized that this was a viable business? People were really interested in what you're doing.
I think the arcade was a big one for me. That
Yeah.
was a breakthrough for me personally because it was, and I've made several arcade cabinets over the years, but the first one was by far the most complex build, physical build I had done. It was the furthest outside of useful I had done at the time. And it was wrapped in a bunch of finish that I wasn't comfortable doing. So, it was like growing up, being in arcades, the idea of having an arcade cabinet in your house was just ridiculous. Like
Oh
you would
yeah.
never. And so then as an adult, I'm like, wait, I think I can do this. And
Yeah.
then once you start going down that path, then it's right outside the store. Still use it. We were playing on it yesterday, and it's one of those things that I I I stepped up to, not going like I don't know if I can do this or not, but I'm gonna give it a shot. I think I can figure out the wood part. I know I can figure out the electronics part. And then past that, it was, I got an artist friend of mine who's amazing to draw all of my family as superheroes on the side. And so the side art for the thing is like these cartoon portraits of us. And it's like one
Cool.
of my most cherished images. It's amazing. And so by the time I got done with my part and his part and, all these other things together, it's just an amazing piece of thing to own, much less having made it. And so that was cool for me. But then having people react to that and be like, oh, I can do that too. I saw you do it. I know it's possible. I can do that too. That was really a breakthrough for me going, oh, like people are taking away from not just the wow factor of this random person did a thing, but they actually feel empowered to do it themselves. And that was the goal anyway. So to see that in action was pretty awesome. And so I think because of that one, I've done several other versions of arcade cabinets because I know that it's something people actually want, whether they want to admit it or not. And then when they find there's a small version that I can put on my bar top that fits in my life better, I'll do that one. Or, we've got a bunch of kids, so here's a 4-player version. So I've tried to find ways to give other people that same feeling in a way that fits with them. And so that was a big one for sure.
Yeah.
R2D2 was another thing like that, which was much later on, but it was that same feeling of, I don't know that I could actually do this, but if I could,
Yeah.
and I mean, having a fully functioning actual R2D2 is awesome. It is
Yeah.
so cool.
It's your childhood dream come true, man.
It is bonkers. I mean, I've had it finished for a couple of years now, but I still walk into the room and I almost every time I walk over and pat him on the head and go, "Hey, buddy." It's like it's just a
We have a kind of a question we ask every guest. And so basically the scenario is there's a zombie apocalypse and like your stuff is basically just ruined. Maybe you're in a new place and you have to start over. Um, what tool do you start with? You've got to have one thing to get started. What tool do you start with to like rebuild your shop?
oh, wow. This is an electric tool or
Whatever you want.
oh, okay.
Just think of it as like, you're putting yourself at great personal risk to get this thing, but it is available, right?
Okay.
So you may have to like be clever about where you go. You might have to kill a zombie or like neutralize a zombie at some point, right?
Okay.
But you
So it
can
needs
get
to
whatever
also
you
do
want.
that. Got it.
No, not necessarily. It's just like this is your you can get whatever you want, but it's like you got to pick the right thing first because it's hard to
Yeah.
get tools.
I think a circular saw.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I would imagine that's probably a common answer, but I
I think
think
you're the
that
first
is
one to answer that actually, but
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man. Because
Yeah.
when people ask like about starting a shop and stuff, I'm always like, circular saw. Do
Hmm.
that first because there are very few things that you can't do with it, but you can make something that will do, you know. It'd be that or a jigsaw, but I think as a if it needed to back up as a weapon, a circular saw definitely. Jigsaw is not really going to be a great weapon. So,
Good
yeah.
one. Okay. I like it. Okay, Bob, thanks so much. Great conversation as usual. It's been really cool talking to you, and I'm sure our audience is going to like this. And speaking of our audience, can you tell us where we can find you?
Sure. All of our stuff is at iliketomakestuff.com. From that kind of one hub, you can get to all the videos and the courses and the store and all of those things. And you can find us on all the social media as well.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all things Shop Talk. If you're ready to try Fusion for yourself, find the link in our description.